Hi there, my name's James Kelly and welcome back to Scott Goes Pop. In this video, I want to talk about something I've been meaning to talk about for 2 or 3 weeks now because on the 19th of August, there was a post on Wings Over Scotland from our old friend Stu. And it was because it was on the 19th of August that I never got around to talking about it because that was the very day I set off my travels. I spent most of the time in the Channel Islands, as you may have deduced. So in the post on August 19th, which was called The Illiterate Solicitor, Stu takes issue with something that Nicola Sturgeon said, I presume in her memoir. He highlights the sentence, a jury concluded that what they experienced, meaning the women in the Alex Salmond trial, that what they experienced wasn't criminal, but that does not mean those experiences didn't happen. And Stu says, in law, yes, it does. That's exactly what it means, he says. He says if you're charged with murder, the jury isn't asked to determine whether murder is a crime. They're asked to decide whether the defendant did what they're accused of by the prosecution. If they decide it did happen, they find the defendant guilty and the judge passes a suitable sentence. If they decide it didn't, the defendant walks free. That's all there is to a trial, Stu says. And he goes on to say later, so when they, meaning the jury, acquitted him on every single charge, they were only making one finding, that beyond a reasonable doubt, the things he was accused of did not happen. No, that was not what the jury found, and that was not the meaning of their finding. And what Stu has said there is such a total and complete misunderstanding of the most fundamental principle of the criminal justice system as to just be cretinous. I mean, it's embarrassing. The whole point of the beyond reasonable doubt principle is that it puts the onus, the burden of proof onto the prosecution. The prosecution have to prove that the defendant committed the crime that he or she is accused of, not on a balance of probabilities, but beyond reasonable doubt. It's a very high threshold. The defense do not have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not commit the crimes. All the defense has to do is to demonstrate that reasonable doubt. That can be even like a 5 or a 10% chance that the defendant did not commit the crime. If the jury thinks that it's highly likely he did commit the crime, but there's a significant doubt that it hasn't reached that sufficiency of proof, they have to acquit. And yet Stu is claiming in all apparent seriousness that the burden of proof is on the defence and that the reason that Alex Salmond was acquitted was because the defence had proved beyond a reasonable doubt and convinced the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Alex Salmond had not committed the crimes and therefore that everybody that had accused them of committing those crimes was lying and that they had perjured themselves. No, it does not work that way, and that is not the meaning of the jury's finding. But you don't need to take my word for that because what I'm going to read out to you now is the speech or the opening part of a speech that a defence lawyer made to the jury in a murder trial in a Scottish court in the mid-1990s. And it's pleading the case of the accused from the point of view of the very beyond reasonable doubt principle and trying to explain to the jury what that means and what it doesn't mean. So this is what the defence lawyer said. When tomorrow you consider your verdict and come back, you will not be asked by the clerk of court who killed the man. It is not a whodunit. This is not sort of 15 amateur detectives trying to work out who is responsible. That is not for us to do that. The question, and the only question, will be what has been established about this man. The Crown need to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. Now that sort of phrase frightens me because it is such a well-known phrase, beyond reasonable doubt. It's on the telly, soap operas, anything else the telly care to deal in, end up using this phrase, beyond reasonable doubt. And it becomes like a game that lawyers play with. We sit round the table. We dress in rather quaint and peculiar clothes. And at the end of the day, phrases like beyond reasonable doubt become a sort of game, but they are not a game. They are, in fact, at the very basis of our system. Let me try to put it my way. without worrying at the moment how his lordship likes to put it. This man is brought here and is suspected because he's the candidate as far as this case is concerned. And you, all of you go away and you consider what you make of it. And all of you unanimously decide it was not he. You would come back and you would acquit him. It's obvious. But all of you might go away and unanimously decide what we think is he did it. That's what we think. We think if you were asking us, he did this murder. He killed the man. In all probability, it was him. You would come back in here and you would acquit him. I hope that's clear. It's only when you get somewhere beyond that that you will end up saying, we will convict a man of murder. Now, the evidence in this case isn't there. And he goes on to explain the lack of evidence as he sees it in that particular case. Now, that's a verbatim account of the speech. And again, you don't need to take my word for that it's verbatim, because the whole thing is on video and it's on YouTube and you can watch it for yourselves. And the reason it's on video is because in the mid-1990s, there was an experiment that court cases, a limited number of Scottish court cases, were televised. They were not televised live. They were recorded and then highlights were shown as part of a documentary series. And so one of the first of the cases that were shown in the first episode was this murder case. And you want to know the name of the defense lawyer who made that speech. The name of that defense lawyer was Gordon Jackson, none other than the man who 25 years later defended Alex Salmond at his own trial. So good luck, Stu, in challenging the authority of this man and telling us what the verdict in the Alex Salmond case meant and what it did not mean. And what it meant was the jury were saying that the facts as they were established were somewhere on a spectrum between absolute certainty that Alex Salmond did not commit the crime all the way through to 90% certainty that he did commit the crime, but there was a reasonable doubt. It could be anywhere on those two extremes or anywhere in between, and we don't know where the jury thought the balance of probabilities lay, and it doesn't matter where they thought the balance of probabilities lay. All that matters was their verdict, and the meaning of that verdict in law was that the prosecution had not proved their case. The threshold, the very high threshold of beyond reasonable doubt, had not been met. It did not mean that the events that were alleged did not happen. It did not mean that the witnesses necessarily lied. Those are all open questions that are not established or settled in law. Now, as you know, as I've described in the previous video, I talked to Alex Salmond at length immediately after his trial. He phoned me up. I talked to him for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and he put his side of the story, and he explained how he thought there had been a conspiracy against him, and you know, a lot of the evidence was untrue. And I found a lot of what he said extremely credible, plausible. So I am totally open to the idea that some of the evidence presented at court may have been factually inaccurate or dishonest, but that has not been established in law. And the only way it would be established is if people were charged with perjury and then a jury considered whether perjury had been committed or not. And none of that has happened, and it may never happen. So what Stu is saying here is just wrong on an almost galactic level. It's almost incomprehensible that a blog site that purports to be some form of journalism could get this so completely wrong. And as I've said many times, Stuart Campbell is a propagandist, but I don't think he's a fool. And so my normal reaction to a situation like this would be he knows perfectly well that what he's peddling is a load of rubbish and that he's not telling the truth to his readers. But I mean, this is just such an extraordinary example of him saying that black is white, and just saying it with so much confidence that I almost doubt that, and I almost think he genuinely doesn't understand this most fundamental principle of the legal system. But you know, I hope that the people who defend him, no matter what, you know, just sort of reflexively defend him in every case, I hope they will realize that this is beyond defense and that, he has just misled people in the most disgraceful way here. I am not in any way suggesting that Alex Salmond there should have been any stain on his character or that any of the events necessarily happened that he was accused of, but that is not established in law. All that is established in law is that the prosecution had not made their case, that they did not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's all that the acquittal verdict means. There was no comment on whether anybody committed perjury, and that is not established in law. Anyway, that's it for now. If you like this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you later.